Don't worry, I'm not going to recap. Cool. So we are talking about Parshat Re'eh, and these are the decrees and ordinances that you'll form in the land. These are the decrees and ordinances, happens to be cool signposts that appear through this entire book. And each time it's almost like a marker that there is a new speech that's happening. So you see it coming again and again and again, and it's grouping themes together. So it's a nice way to kind of pick up what's happening over there. So we are what? We have one. Yeah, we have one last week. There's quite a few of them. I keep pointing them out when they come up, and it's an interesting layer of structure within. It's not actually just the parshas that are structured. There's all sorts of sub layers as well. So we are then told about the private altar. So what's the private altar? Is that there was a period of time, about 14 years, from when we entered the land and the mishkan was erected at Shiloh. In that time in between, people could build altars anyway and sacrifice to Hashem. And now what we're getting told is that after the fact, it's going to be really important for us to set up. Basically, you can't have any private altars anymore. It all needs to be a communal altar. Everything needs to go there. Now, why is that? We're going to be told soon about basically the permission to eat the redeemed offerings. So originally, man wasn't allowed to eat animals. Okay, it was seen as a concession that we were then allowed to eat animals. And so what we see is there are all sorts of things that are put in place in order to make sure that it's done properly. So one of the things, when are we told we are allowed to eat? So I'm pretty sure it's no, after Noah, I believe, right? No. I'm not searching another one. I'm proper blanked. I don't know. It happens at some point. But before that, we aren't. No, Avram already serves. Exactly. So, I mean, it was definitely before that. I'm fairly certain. Yeah, anyway, the point is that it wasn't the original ideal, and I'm pretty sure it was Noah. So what we see here is, listen to how it's talking about eating. So it says, in all your soul's desire, you may slaughter and eat meat, according to the blessing that Hashem your God has given to you. But you shall not eat the blood. You shall pour it onto the earth like water. So we're told not to have the blood. The blood is the life blood, literally life blood. And there's different levels to the soul. One of the levels of the soul is actually residing in the blood. So the idea of not actually eating, not consuming the blood is this like separation between basically realizing what the food is and what it's not, and kind of not taking it for granted that you're just. It was often fantastic. Thanks. So this is actually a good setup. Tam can be Googling in the background to confirm. So basically the point is that originally you could have temples everywhere. Then you needed, not temples, sorry, altars in order to sacrifice to Hashem. Now it's all being consolidated in the Mishkan. Now, why is that? Originally, you were able to eat meat after you've sacrificed it to Hashem. So there wasn't going into Moishes and just getting a slab of meat. You were allowed to eat the offering, right? Because there's certain offerings that are burnt up completely, but many of the other offerings were supposed to be eaten. That was actually part of it. The word korban is from the root karev, which is to come close. That was part of the process. It was to come close between family, between Hashem, all of that. So the key thing here is that beforehand you could do it anyway. Now we're being given the permission to eat regularly. Like you can just do shchita and eat. You don't need to have an offering. And that's important because if the only way you can have steak is by offering a sacrifice, then are you offering the sacrifice to Hashem because you want to come close to him or because you want steak? And so that it removes that sort of issue there. Then it's we're reminded that we eat the tithes in Jerusalem. So they would basically bring the tithes to Jerusalem. If they couldn't bring it or it was crops or whatever, they would exchange it for money and then bring it together, and everyone kind of has one big. It actually was a big jewel. It was a very big party that happened in Jerusalem, and it's also nice because it kind of congregates the entire community around one place. A lot of very important functions there. Then, very cool, it says, you may slaughter your cattle as I have commanded you. Kasher tziviticha. This is one of the key phrases which shows us the existence of the oral law. Very simply. Now, why's that? So it's clear to it's not just our tradition. So we have a tradition that we were given the oral law accompanied with the written law. We have the two things that were given simultaneously. But even just looking at the text, you can see that it had to have been the case. When we got the written text, there had to have been a sort of companion guide, a manual, in order to be able to understand what the written text was saying. So this is one of the things that's given, is that there are references to external information. So within the text, it says here, example, you will slaughter as I've commanded you, but nowhere else in any of the written Torah does it describe how we can actually do that. So that means that the people who are engaging with this must have known. There had to have been that tradition. And you go anywhere in the world to any Jewish community, and they'll argue about whether they can have rice on Pesach, but everyone agrees with how shechita is supposed to be done. And another interesting thing as well, anyone who's looked inside a Torah knows that in Hebrew, we don't have any vowels, okay? We don't have vowels, and so we use the nekudot in order to be able to make vowel sounds. So in the Torah, there are no nekudot, which means that you don't actually know what the words mean if you don't have a tradition for how the words are supposed to be pronounced. Chet lamed beis. Does that spell chalav, milk, or chaylev, fat? So which is it? Do you not cook a kid in its mother's milk or its mother's fat? This has profound halachic implications. So it's inconceivable that they wouldn't have had that companion guide. Makes sense. And again, you go around the world, there's absolutely nobody argues about how these words are pronounced. And it's cool because we're going to see later in this week's Parsha, we learn meat and milk. It comes up. So two of these examples are both in the same Parsha, which is quite nice. And maybe at the end, I'll tell you a really cool thing about shechita. So basically, that's what it says over there. We are then told about some general principles of observance. And basically, while it's important to find intellectual reasons for things, at the end of the day, we do them because Hashem told us to. That's kind of the foundational thing. And then we are told very strongly to not copy basically how the nations around us were acting. So there are prohibitions against, it says, basically don't try and seek out their gods. How did the nations worship their God? I will do the same. And basically there's an additional exhortation here to say that don't try and worship Hashem in the way that they would worship their gods. Then, this is a fascinating section. So, first of all, it says, this entire word that I command you today, you shall not add to it and you shall not subtract from it. That's what's called Baal Tosef. So, this is one of the mitzvahs. You are not allowed to add anything to the Torah and you're not allowed to subtract from it. You can't add an extra string of tzitzit. You can't subtract pasuk from Tehillim, what's it called in the Tefillin is the word. So basically that's a really important thing, but this is the cool part. So if there shall stand up in your midst a prophet or a dreamer of a dream, and he will produce to you a sign or a wonder, and that sign or the wonder comes about, and then he says, let us follow the gods of others that you did not know, and we shall worship them. So it's talking about a prophet who actually performs miracles. Okay. And he then says, let's go worship these other gods. That's how you know that is a false prophet. There's a built-in like defense mechanism. But yeah, how fascinating is that? There's like a built-in defense mechanism here to say that like the second that they say don't follow God, you know that it's not coming from God, it's trickery, it's things like like that, which is fascinating. And it says, why is that? Hashem, your God, is testing you to know whether you love Hashem with all your heart and with all your soul.
We said that last week as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of this. Then we are told there's quite a lot that's spoken about people who try and get other people to sin, specifically with idolatry. And it says if your brother or your son or your daughter or your wife will secretly entice you, saying, "Let's go worship the gods of others," then basically don't listen to him, kill him, and what's it called? Stoning. So that was the punishment for here. And cast the first stone. It literally says you'll throw your hand shall be the first against him. So there's no pity for anyone who tries to convert people to idolatry. So that's talking on an individual level. Then it expands and it talks about the wayward city. So it says if you happen to have a city and the whole city has become idolatrous, then they continue to kind of basically there's a whole formula for what you would do. You go, you investigate it, and if it turns out the city is an idolatrous city, the city gets wiped out. And you actually burn everything completely. You don't keep anything from the city, and it shall be an eternal heap. It shall not be rebuilt. So the actual city itself can never kind of be inhabited again.
And does that happen?
Let me see. Does it say anything here?
Isn't that like the city is being destroyed because they're all idolatrous in that?
Yeah.
Does it happen? I can't remember. Well, that's the one.
Well, that's what she just asked, and I'm checking. My knowledge of the nah part is still on its way. I'm still focusing on the ta, which is where we're at now. We can check it. It could be Tam. Can you Google? There definitely was. So I don't believe it was. The very cool thing is it says Jericho wouldn't be rebuilt, and it hasn't. And Jericho, they found that the walls, they know where Jericho is, and they've discovered it and covered it, whatever. And they found that the walls of Jericho, like there's rubble, and the rubble is all outwards, that the walls didn't fall in, they fell out. And that happens to be the case around the entire city, except for one little section. And this is, okay, I do know a little bit of the Nach part, but basically, what's her name? Rachav. Rachav, who is a very good looking prostitute, there's an essential part of the story, and it is described that way. So basically, she helps the spies escape the city, and she says, "Okay, when you're coming to destroy it, save me and my family." And they basically like tie a ribbon on the window, and then you won't be destroyed. And so the entire wall falls down except for hers. And we found a city where the entire wall is destroyed, falling inwards. And yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. And then, by the way, with Stone, they found a whole bunch of corpses that were basically like kind of destroyed from just like basically there was legs and no top. And they found a whole bunch of pottery. Basically, they found the site and they were dating it, and they realized that they thought that there was a problem with the dating of the sites, that it couldn't have been at the period that they thought it was because there was glazed pottery, and glazed pottery hadn't been invented yet. And then they noticed something really interesting about the pottery in that it was only glazed on one side. It wasn't a completely glazed pottery. And then what they realized is that the pottery wasn't glazed through human process. It was basically a heat event. I think that's what it was basically like a meteor strike that had blazed such intense heat out in all directions that whatever pottery kind of would have been facing that side got immediately glazed, and destroyed the place, and it hasn't literally been rebuilt to this day, and the earth is all salted, and it's very cool. If you look around the Dead Sea area, there are sites of massive like graves which is only like you would only find near big cities, because I mean they have to get rid of their dead somehow. So there's no that. It was basically a very, very arable area that supported like 5 different cities. And that had to have been the case before there was ever the Red Sea there, because right now it's basically it's hotels. Do you know what I mean? There's nothing else you can really grow there. Tam checks. We're not sure if there was a wayward city that was destroyed, but someone else might know, and I will brush up on my math part. Cool. So we're then told laws of mourning. So it says that you don't cut yourselves, don't make a bald spot between your eyes. For your holy people, these are all things that the other nations would do as part of their mourning practices. You shall not eat any abomination. These are the animals you may eat: the ox, the sheep, the goats, the hart, the hare, the yachmor, and it basically just gives a list of things that you can eat. And then it tells us, oh no, just in general now. So the connection here is it says that you are a treasured people, you are a holy people, kadosh. And this idea of being kadosh comes into the idea of eating. Because why do we eat? Holy things to make us holy. And it's why we refrain from eating unholy things. So it basically gives us a list of the things that we can eat, and then it gives us the rule of thumb. Every animal that and we can eat. Yeah, there we go. Says it right here. And then it gives us some warnings, and it says, look out for the camel, the hare, and the hyrax, because they chew the cud, but they don't have split hoofs. And then the pig, because it has a split hoof and doesn't chew the cud. And this is why I mean the pig, it's the quintessential like non-Jew, like non-kosher food, right? Like you'll find people who like won't, you know what I mean? They don't keep anything, but they won't eat pig. That's like the line they won't cross. And it's interesting that that's become such a like big cultural thing. Pig, it's the only one that has its like cloven hoofs but doesn't chew the cud. And so what that is it's showing, pretending to the world like you're kosher. Look at me, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good. But really on the inside, you don't embody those values. You're not actually kosher, and that is very dangerous. Yeah.
Are there some people that don't like they won't eat it, plus they won't touch it, even though it's wrapped and like you go to a non-kosher person's house and they start passing you stuff.
I'm not sure. There are all sorts of people that do all sorts of things. But the interesting thing is how even people who aren't like connected or religious, this is often a line that they, won't cross. So that's interesting. And then it says, so that interestingly enough is, and I've got a book on that here. So that was like my first foray into this type of stuff. And because I'd watched a video that was like, and it's amazing because it says that these are the animals that you can eat, and we've been all around the world and we haven't found any animals that like other than the ones on this list which do it. So Rav Natan Slifkin, who was excommunicated from the Haredi community after writing his book, which I have here now, and I actually went to his museum in Israel, a natural history museum. So he wrote the book about how, like, not necessarily, and like whatever. I still need to read it. I've got a problem of collecting more books than I actually get through. But in short, if I remember correctly, it's that no, there kind of are these other things maybe, but it's still descendant from the camel family. But regardless, the Torah doesn't say these are the only ones. It just says, what's it called? It says, don't eat from these. Okay. And then it gives you a list of things that would be local and endemic to the area. But so I've stopped using that as a particular, like, quote unquote proof, but the second part is rock solid and it's very, very cool. Remember that, so just to clarify that in case I wasn't clear, the Torah doesn't say these are the only animals that have these signs, blah, blah, blah. It says these are animals that you need to watch out for. And so, Exactly. The thing about the fish is cool. We're coming to that now. So it's not an issue unless someone stakes their claim that this is what the Torah said. And then it could possibly be. But even from what I saw, it was like you can still read into it that it's, I mean, it's still part of the camel family. It's anyway. That's an aside. The cool thing is then we get told about the fish. And fish, to be kosher, you need fins and scales. Amazing. So now we step out of this. Is actually, I remember now, this is a super, super oral Torah kind of a parsha. So fins and scales is what makes a kosher fish kosher. So in the Gemara, it gives us basically, here's a question. If you're in a desert island and you're walking along the beach and you see a fish has been bitten by a shark, it's chopped in half, and you can see that it has scales, but where the fins are supposed to be, you can't see. So you don't know whether this fish has fins as well. Can you eat it?
Yes,
Why?
because there aren't fish that only have fins or only have, no, there are fish that only have fins, but there aren't fish that have scales that don't have fins.
And in a simpler way, it says you can eat it because any fish that has scales has fins as well. And you listening at home might be thinking, well, what about sea snakes? They're not fish. Okay. They're not fish. They're just in the water. You'd be surprised how many times it comes up. It's very funny. I promise you, it comes up often. It's very funny. So the point is that's really cool. Why? Because, do you know what I mean? We've trawled the oceans. Think about when this was, written. Like, there was no way that a human mind could have known that, which is very cool. We do. So that one is just very, very cool. Slifkin, by the way, doesn't like this one particularly either, but I'm comfortable with it. So I don't mind using it. And then it basically tells us about the birds. Now, the birds are different because it says, this is what you can't eat. And then it lists a whole bunch of there. And it doesn't give us the English translation because we don't actually know what all of the words are. So even though birds, we can't eat these that are listed and everything else we can, because we don't know definitively which are the ones that we can't eat, it's basically we can only eat ones that we have an established tradition for eating. And we pretty much confident on all of the ones that we eat. There are some people who don't eat turkey because a rabbi once saw, I mean, not just a rabbit, it was like a proper, he saw a turkey, was it eating meat or killing something or like what something that like killing a snake. Yeah, it was predatory. And we know that we don't eat like predators, like none of the birds that are predators. So that's why him and whoever, well, I mean, he doesn't anymore. He's passed away quite a while ago. But that's why some people might say they don't eat turkey. That's the background to that. And then it says, it repeats, you are holy people. We're told also not to eat carcasses. And then it says, you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. We get this 3 times throughout the Torah. And this is one of those times. Mazel tov, signpost. The fact that it appears 3 times gives us the 3 different prohibitions that we can't cook it together, we can't eat it together, and we can't benefit from it together. So you wouldn't be able to cook it together at a non-kosher restaurant and serve it to other people. That is in and of itself a prohibition. And if you happen to have meat and milk that was mixed together, you couldn't like feed it to your dog because you would be benefiting, don't have to feed it dog food. So that is some meat and milk stuff. Now, this is one of the quintessential chukim, which are supposed to be things that we don't understand. And it is said that it's the case, which is interesting because we can find a very, very beautiful reason for why we wouldn't mix meat and milk. And the fact that it's still considered a chok is kind of basically it's that idea that I said earlier, which is even though we find intellectual reasons for explaining why it is that, like the intellectual reasoning behind it, at the end of the day, we don't understand any of it. You know what I mean? Like on a macro sort of scale, we only do it because Hashem told us to, as simply as that. And it's important to kind of found your human understanding. So meat and milk. What's the interesting thing here? So it doesn't say meat and milk. It says do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. Okay. What is meat? You only get meat through the death of an animal, right? That's how you get meat. What is milk?
The products of the animal that's living.
Not only that, but a mother feeds its child milk. That's what the kid is going to be eating. Like that's literally, it's milk is life-giving, it's sustenance. It's so you've got on the one hand something that represents the essence of death. Meat you only get through the death of an animal. And then on the other hand, you've got life. So it's a sensitivity to, again, meat doesn't come from hoishis. It comes from somewhere. This is an animal. This is a real life like thing, and treat it with dignity and like know what it is that you're having, and how callous it would be to take a kid and then use its mother's milk as the instrument of like its death. Do you know what I mean? It's like a twisted sort of a thing. And that is that. Then it says we do tithes again. And we bring everything to eat before Hashem. And then it says that here, if you can't bring it, you exchange it for money. You take the money there, and then you use it on whatever your soul desires. Cattle, flocks, wine, or alcoholic beverage. You could fulfill your obligation of tithes by getting very, very liquored up at the temple in Jerusalem. It was seriously a party. Like everyone's arriving. They're all bringing their like best food. You know what I mean? Everyone's like gathered there. There's bras happening everywhere. I mean, it's very cool. And also this is part of like Aisha's what's it called? No, not Aisha's manifesto, Aisha's discovery, I think it's called, workshop, where they like go through, Torah evidence. And this is one of the things that they point to are the Shalosh Regalim, where like legislated every single male over a certain age needs to be at one specific point in the land, needs to gather at the temple, which means that no one's guarding the border. No one's like anyway, and everyone knows this. Everyone knows that these guys are gathering, leaving everything unguarded for 3 specific days in the year. You'd think that it would be the easiest thing to just like take over this place. And we see that everyone, I mean, we do observe the Shalosh Regalim, and it says that the nations will like not be jealous of your land while you're there. And it's just anyway, it's one of their things. I don't really use it so much. Okay, then there's remission of loans. So at the end of every 7 years, you basically all loans are returned. And then we get to something very interesting. So it says, if there will be a destitute person among you, any of your brethren in any of your cities, in your lands that Hashem your God has given you, don't harden your hearts or close your hand against your destitute brother. Rather, open your hand to him. And basically, this is talking about giving charity. This is where we understand the different levels of charity. So the first thing is a destitute person among you. So the first port of call for charity is your family. You don't go out, giving like to Hatzalah if there's actually people in your immediate vicinity who need help. We first start off by picking up the people around us. Then it says your brethren in your cities. So it's the circle that keeps expanding. And then it's your land, which is Israel. And that is the order of giving charity. You first start with your community, and then you kind of progress it out. And I don't think that it means you need to not donate elsewhere until you fix the problem here, because like they're all insurmountable. I think it's more that order of priority. That makes sense. Yeah, cool. And then it says, open your hands, don't harden your heart or close your hand. So this is talking to 2 different kind of people. So someone who kind of, Those are basically, if harden your heart is someone who wants to give, but like at the last moment pulls back. So like, don't harden your heart. Don't like close yourself off to the giving. And then closing your hand is, yeah, basically people who just don't want to give, people who are callous. Then it says, destitute people will not cease to exist within the land. There will always be poor people. I took this to mean like, don't believe what the snake oil salesmen are telling you. Like whenever a human being will come and say, I can fix everything, that's when you get communism and stuff, like all of these things. You know what I mean? Like trying to fix, like basically there's certain things that are part of the inevitable thing. And how do we fix it? Not by saying that we're going to be able to fix it with some sort of grand scheme like that, but by the very thing that we had before. You look out for your family, you look out for your fellow. And as a community, we look after each other and pick ourselves up. And we've seen that that's what the Jewish community has done through out all generations. Lawrence Kellerman has a like beautiful piece where he talks about all of the charitable things that Jewish people kind of have established. There's a beautiful thing where it talks about like there's basically like more gemachs than there were shuls in a certain place, just like for everything. It's very much been a part of our identity. Then in the second last part of the Parsha, we learn about a Jewish bondsman. So a Jewish bondsman is somebody who has sold himself into slavery. A lot of the stuff when you talk about slaves in the Torah, it's this type of indentured servitude, which is somebody might be so poor that the only way they can sustain it, they've sold their land. Remember, everyone has a like actual plot of land as an inheritance. And they end up selling themselves. It also could be that they have stolen and they can't pay back what they stole, so they need to sell themselves into slavery to repay the loan. So it's talking about this person, and it says, if it comes to like after 6 years, he now needs to be set free because he gets set free on the 7th year. Got the 7 days, 7th is rest, 7th year is we have this cycle of 7 that keeps happening. And if he says to you, I will not leave because he loves you, basically the guy has gotten Stockholm syndrome. He is very happy being a slave, indentured servant in this household. Then what do? Who remembers exactly? Pierces ears. Now, against the doorpost. Think of that symbolism, right? Even better than that. What happens when you pierce an ear on the door? What's it covered in? Blood. Yeah. We leave Egypt. We leave Egypt. We leave slavery and enter freedom through a bloody doorpost. Now this person has the opportunity to go free, to serve Hashem, to live that life, and he's choosing to stay in servitude to another person. Well, you're going to go back into that. You're going to go back into that slavery through that bloody doorpost that you should have walked out of.
So he stays.
Yeah, he stays. Because he's chosen to, and that's the process where he gets the oil through his ear. Then we're told about the firstborns that need to be redeemed and given to Hashem. And then we are told about the 3 pilgrimage festivals: Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and that's the end of the Parsha. Thank you for coming.
It just mentions that.
I mean, it says, you shall make a festival of Sukkot for a 7-day period. You shall gather in your threshing floor from your wine vat. You shall rejoice in your festival, you and your. It's like basically just a little recap of what it is. And then, 3 times a year, you'll appear before Hashem. Don't come empty-handed.
It'd be rude.
It would be rude, yeah. And you were specifically told to come and get drunk. So, if you want to. Well, to your heart's content. And that is that. Thank you for coming to Parshat Re'eh.
Thank you.